Debug macro. Debug macro is used to print given value by its variable name, file name and line number of that file. So in today's video we are going to discuss why we should almost always use debug macro instead of print line when debugging your Rust code. So now let's assume a case where something goes wrong in a function. So what we all do is our first instinct is to just print that value or variable to see what's going wrong, and sometimes it can get messy to look around in a terminal. So let's look at this example where we have two different variables and we are printing them. So now let's run our program. So in terminal we can see it correctly print our variables x, which is 8, and y it's 9. So whenever we use println macro, it only prints the value. uh, if you have a lot of dynamic values appearing in your terminal, you'll quickly get confused, like where is my variable x and where is my variable y, and where is this 8 coming from, like where is this 9 coming from. To fix this, uh, what we all do is we give our println statement a unique name key to identify this value coming from this key. So we do something like, let's see, print x and print y, and now if we run this we can easily get uh, differentiate both of our variables in our terminal. So uh, so in today's video we'll discuss the debug macro. So now let's use debug macro and see what's the difference. And now let's run our program. So as we can see that uh, not only do we get the variable name as a key by default, but we also get the file name and line number. This makes finding the source of the log incredibly easy. So that's one cool feature of debug macro. And now let's talk about another feature of debug macro, where let's assume that let's first comment this code and uncomment this code. So uh, as we can see that whenever we want to print our vector or hash map or hash set or dynamic heavy dynamic values in our terminal by using println, we usually have to do this type of formatting, which is sometime very devious to use. So in that scenario, if we use debug, so let's see what happens. And now we are gonna run our program. So as we can see, we uh, we did manage to print our vector by not using any formatting uh, that we used to do in println, and that's very unique feature of debug macro, which I really like. But one thing to keep in mind that uh, debug macro returns the value which it consumes. Like if we pass the vector or number or anything, it literally returns that value. So if we were to use dynamic heap allocation sort of values, we should always use a reference of it. Like, let me show you. Uh, if we now pass this vector to v, we'll get a compile time error. So let's see what it says. It is saying that uh, the value is moved to debug macro. So that's why we should always use the reference if we want to pass uh, if we want to pass a reference of a dynamic value like vector hash map and heavy heap allocated values, so we can easily pass in debug macro. So now, okay, we have covered all the topic, and yeah, since we are discussing that debug macro returns a value which whatever value we pass, and that's the main feature of debug macro. And let's see how we can take advantage of that feature. So let's comment this code, and first let's uncomment this. And in this variable, as we can see that we are doing some mathematical operation, and now let's assume that this part is coming from some dynamic variable. So let's see this now. uh, as we can see that uh, we are passing that same multiplication dynamic value anywhere in our debug statement, and not only it returns a value but it also print that value. Like if you want to print return plus debug that value, we can use by using debug macro. So let's run our program. So as we can see, we can see our value in terminal, and also it works in result variable. So also let's also print result. So as we can see, we also get a result plus dynamic value. So I guess we have covered all the main features of debug macro. So to wrap this up, uh, when using debug, we have to keep two things in mind. Like whenever we use dynamic heap allocated values like vectors, hash map, hash set, uh, we should always use a reference to avoid ownership issue. And debug macro is for development only. We should always remove them before we push our code to production. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you.